got so big it you hold of this kind.
Hello, Internet. I'm here today to talk to you about something a little bit more serious than I normally do. We've always made it a very, very intentional choice to stay away from discourse too much on this channel. Sometimes we get into it, sometimes we don't. But as a general rule, we'd rather focus on Star Wars. Even the videos that I'm going to be making about The Rise of Skywalker, the ones I've already made, you know, they're not really about the greater conversation of The Rise of Skywalker. The videos I made about Last Jedi weren't about, you know, The Last Jedi. They weren't about the conversation. They were just about what was presented, breaking down the meaning and what we had. And that's something that I'm going to be doing continuing onward. But it also felt a little bit disingenuous to not in some way address these things. And I suppose here I'm going to warn you that I'm going to spoil some things from The Rise of Skywalker. I'm not really going to get into or analyze them, but they are a part of this conversation that I want to have with you guys. So if you are here and you haven't seen the movie yet, just be warned. I will bring up some of the bigger, more controversial points of the film. Really, what I want to talk about is larger than just The Rise of Skywalker, larger than The Last Jedi, larger than the sequel trilogy. I want to get into this idea of stories, and why we have some stories and why we don't. Because this has become such a big part of what Star Wars is, even outside of an individual film. It goes all the way back to the Disney buyout, where legends became legends. With the expanded universe, as we knew it, went away and made room for the new expanded universe. And starting there, things really took a turn. But even then, you can go all the way back to the prequels, and people not liking how the prequels were done or wishing that different things there were done in different ways. So there's always been this idea of we have always gotten a story, but inevitably when we get a story, that means there's an infinite number of stories we don't get. And how do we address that as fans, and how do we talk about it? There was a phrase that was bandied about for a while that is kind of fallen out of internet culture vernacular when it comes to Star Wars, but I think is what encapsulates this is this idea of missed opportunities. This idea that you could have told this story and you didn't. And I'm a little bit wary to use the phrase because it kind of comes out of the darker, nastier part of fandom that I definitely don't like to acknowledge more than I have to on this channel. I do think it's the best descriptor for what I'm talking about. I suppose I'm making this a really big long introduction before I'm getting to my point, but I feel the need to contextualize what I'm doing a little bit so that no one thinks I'm doing this in bad faith. But I suppose the other thing I'd say is inevitably when I go to make a video like I'm about to do, where I try not to come down on a side and I just try to have conversation, I don't want to sound like I'm being too much of a centrist on things, I suppose. There's always this idea that, you know, not every side actually has a right, because some sides are actually pretty terrible, and I don't deny that. There are people out there who claim to be Star Wars fans who are just really doing horrible things and really saying horrible things for really horrible reasons. I don't want to list the group by name, but the type of people that don't like the sequel trilogy on the basis that it has a female lead, or people of color in prominent roles, and that bothers them, and that's not what I'm talking about. Like, that's not what this video is about. This video is not about diversity in storytelling versus appeasing people who only want to see themselves reflected in a story. So when I talk about sides, I'm not even including that bigoted side of fandom. That's not what this is about. Please don't mistake me for excusing them or saying that's okay. Because not liking a movie because you don't like who's being represented on screen is not a good reason to like a movie ever. But I want to have a different conversation, a conversation between just decent people who struggle with a story and struggle with story choices. So with that all out of the way, let me get into what I want to talk about. As I already said, you know, you can look through any kind of story choice in any of the films. I can't really attest to the original trilogy. I was not alive when the original trilogy started coming out, but I do know the prequel trilogy. I do know that everyone has their fix for the prequel trilogy. Even the biggest prequel apologist like myself, we all have, well, yeah, but you know, if they had just done this and this, then it would have solved those problems. So that absolutely exists. then you have, like I said, the shift into Legends, and the people say there's so many great stories in Legends that now won't ever make it into the big screen, and those should just get adapted. That, of course, gets hairy because not everyone thinks those great stories are great. I have books, I've read books that I think are abysmal, and have had people tell me that that's their favorite book. I have read books that I love and people tell me it's trash. You know, it's all subjective. So if you kept only the good stuff from Legends, it's like, well, who defines the good stuff? Probably the person who really needs it to show up, I suppose. But then we get into the sequel trilogy. So the phrase missed opportunities came when a photo was circulated a while back, a photoshopped thing that had Han, Luke, and Leia, Chewie, and maybe Lando in their sequel trilogy aged characters, but the idea was they were all in the Falcon, and it was like, what if we had made the sequel trilogy about the legacy characters and not had, you know, Ben, Rey, Poe, and Finn, Rose, all of the characters that we've gotten so far. And it came with the phrase missed opportunities. The problem with this conversation is a lot of times it gets born out of that really nasty side of fandom that I said I didn't want to talk about, who hide behind wanting Han, Luke, and Leia to be central characters when really they just mean they don't like the characters we got. But what I struggle with in this is, as somebody who adores the sequel trilogy, and it's no secret that I adore the sequel trilogy and I love all of our sequel trilogy characters, it's rough because I can't say that I wouldn't have been excited about a Han, Luke, and Leia movie, especially if Lando was there. You know, I don't necessarily have the most nostalgia for the original trilogy. My nostalgia is largely for the prequel trilogy, because that was the trilogy that was coming out when I was a kid. But when I saw the first Rise of Skywalker trailer at Celebration, like, I cried when I saw Lando. And I think it's really disingenuous that a lot of people go off on, you know, the sequel trilogy is so great and it's perfect, and if you question the sequel trilogy in any way, then you're not a real fan. You're just like an old school fanboy who can't get over Han, Luke, and Leia. I'm like, yeah, but if that was true, like, how many of us were excited to see those characters? How great was it to see the legacy characters that we had in the sequel trilogy? That said, I adore Rey and Ben and Finn and Poe. I love getting to know Rose and Holdo and all of these other side characters that have come into the story. I don't want to imagine a galaxy where I never got to know them as characters. And I think the crux of this, what I would say, the real point is, there is no such thing as one good story. We are big fans of Legends here at the channel. You've seen Professor Django and I do many a stream on Legends material. We also try to keep up with as much canon material as we can. We love both universes. I will always love the Legends universe. I will always have a lot of nostalgia for the Legends universe. I'll always get excited when something makes the jump from Legends into current canon. And I don't try to pretend that I don't. But that's not at a cost of loving current canon too. I think both universes are great, and I'm so glad that I get to experience both. I'm so glad that I get to experience the canon universe where Luke Skywalker never ran off to be in exile. He got to have a successful Jedi temple. He got to have all of these Jedi students. He got to have a son. Leia had 3 kids. They went off and they did, like, I've seen that universe. I have seen the universe where all of that happens, and you have all of the Imperial Remnant stuff, and you have the Yuuzhan Vong, and you go all the way back, and you have all of the great stuff in the Old Republic canon that I absolutely adore. I still have that, and I still get to experience that, and I get to see the current canon that's up on screen right now, and I love that. And I think, to kind of go into, I warned you I was going to spoil some stuff from the Rise of Skywalker. The big thing is Rey having a lineage, having this heritage, and taking the name Skywalker by her choice at the end of the Rise of Skywalker. A lot of people didn't like that because they liked the story of Rey of Jakku, Rey who's just Rey. What if there's a phenomenal story to be told about Rey of Jakku, and a phenomenal story to be told about Rey Palpatine, who took the name Skywalker? What if both of them can be great stories? And I think this is the problem we get into with discourse, is it becomes this, I wanted to see this story is amazing, this story would have spoken to these people, and it's terrible that we didn't get that story. But the story we got tells a different story that speaks to different people. And if all of our feelings are apparently valid, and all of our feelings apparently we have a right to say, then everyone has a right to feel that way about either side. I think if there was something that was truly a correct choice, like if there was one clear, true, obvious answer, we wouldn't have this discussion. We keep having this discussion because the other stories have merit. A story where we get to see Han, Luke, and Leia together again on an adventure has merit. I think it's really sad that we never got to see all three of them together at any point in time in the sequel trilogy. I think it's a real shame. But I also wouldn't trade the three movies we have for anything because I love the story that gets told there. And the story that gets told there where they don't, the main original three never really see each other again, at least in the land of the living, that story teaches you a lot about failure, it teaches you a lot about loss, and it teaches you a lot about adversity and overcoming in that, where seeing them together could have taught us something else. So it's not that one is better or worse, it's we got one. This is the one we have, this is the one we can talk about. And then there's other choices that would have been good too. There's a universe where Luke is fascinating as an always successful Jedi Master, and there's a universe where Luke is fascinating as a complete failure. One isn't actually better than the other, it just so happens that one is currently canon. And that's all there is to it. And you bring that into something like Ben dying at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. Moving on into the Force is probably a better way to say it. There's a universe where there's an absolutely spectacular story for him post Rise of Skywalker where he lives, and it's being written by fans right now. And the story we got still has merit, and some of you may disagree with me on that, and that's fine. But it's the story we got. And it's not a bad story because there's another good story out there. It's just, as it happens, there is more than one good story. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. When we're talking to somebody who would have rather seen Luke a certain way, who would rather see Rey a certain way, who would rather see Ben a certain way, it's important to remember that there is more than one good story. And I guess I want to talk about all of this because it's been pretty nasty, and I guess I kind of expected it to be nasty online post Rise of Skywalker. It's just been nasty in a way that I didn't expect, and I really hope that this video will be unimportant in days. Like, I would really like it to have been a complete waste of time to make this because we'll all calm down and it will all be better. One of the big reasons why we specifically don't talk about discourse on the channel is because, you know, what's a big topic right now won't be a big topic in a year. And I want to be able to come back and look at my videos and be proud of what I made and not go, I wonder why I made that one. That said, I really hope this video is rendered useless in a couple of weeks and that people can kind of calm down and express the hurt and pain they have over things that happened in The Rise of Skywalker, or the hurt and pains of things that happened in The Last Jedi or The Force Awakens, or go right on to how Padme died in the prequel trilogy. Like, anything anywhere in the long history of things in Star Wars that have let us down. And find a way to express that and feel that, but also accept that there could have been something else good to tell. You know, I'd like to really have a so what on the end of this video, and I don't really know that there is one. I guess what I would ask is, you know, if you are a part of the greater online discourse in some way or another, take a step back, realize that these characters mean a lot to us in our real lives. They are people we identify with, they are people that help us grow, and it's absolutely valid and absolutely normal to attach to them or identify with them and to get value from them, but to remember that while all of that is valid and absolutely not silly or stupid in any way, they are still fictional people, and to not let how we treat real people who really exist be impacted by how we feel about what happened to somebody fictionally. When we take in a story fictionally, that should impact how we are dealing with ourselves and teach us maybe a lesson in how to deal with other people, but not impact us or drive us to be terrible to other people. So that's kind of my thoughts on this. Thank you guys for listening who are here. I'm sorry if I've upset you guys in any way. I hope I haven't, because I like to think what I've said is pretty reasonable, but it may not be. But like I said, I just kind of say this to bring it up too, because, I mean, as a channel, we've been very solidly convinced that Rey is not related to anyone for the last 2 years, and I don't want to sound super hypocritical to be like, this is clearly what happened, and then have something else totally happen and be like, oh, I'm just turning to be topical or popular or whatever. No, that's not it. I'm just going to present Star Wars to the best of my understanding. Django and I both really believe in that. That understanding is going to change with each release of Star Wars, and I have nothing to hide in things I've said about Star Wars in the past. Thank you guys for watching, as always, and until the next time, keep it real, fly casual.
Cooking candy sausages!